treat for all of us, and I am just so pleased to be the moderator. I do want to, while it's on my mind, thank Dean Pamela George for all of her great work. And to all of my YALE colleagues, thank you all very much. What we have tonight, ladies and gentlemen, are two of the real outstanding writers, thinkers of public policy, and a number of important issues to all of us in this country, particularly to the African American community. I'd like to just introduce them briefly. I know that their bios are floating around, and you know many of you are acquainted with them, but it's important to highlight just a couple of things. So if you don't mind, I'd like to introduce the two. We deliberately set the stage in this fashion with me over here and them over there, because I'm not going to be involved much with what lies between them. We want to have a free and open flowing discussion about matters of importance. And in terms of format, what we intend to do is for me to start off asking a few questions. There are a number of important policy issues in which both of our guests have written about, and I want to get them involved in the discussion on that. And then we will open it up to you. There are microphones in the aisle. We simply ask that you be respectful and not preach to us, but actually ask the question. And remember, I am from a school that believes that a speech, in order to be immortal, need not be eternal. So I want you to keep it short and sweet and get right to the point. Professor Lani Guinier, many of us know, outstanding as the first African-American woman to be tenured at the Harvard Law School. She is a professor of law at Harvard, and formerly was a professor of law at the University of Pennsylvania for over 10 years. I would say she, at her heart and soul, a civil rights lawyer, and very much involved in public policy. Her teaching interests involve voting rights, democratic theory, law and social change. She's the author of many articles and books. Many of you have read her book, The Miner's Canary, which is a very thoughtful book about where we are. Yeah, of course, nothing provocative there. Our other guest is Juan Williams. Juan, and I should mention also, because it is important, that Professor Guinier, graduate of Radcliffe College and the YALE Law School. Now, Juan Williams now serves as a senior correspondent for NPR, National Public Radio, political analyst and commentator for Fox Television, the prize-winning author and columnist and writer for the Washington Post. As many of you know, he's served, worked at the Washington Post for over 21 years. He too is the author of several books, mostly books related to history, and of course the award-winning biography of Thurgood Marshall that he did. His latest book, which brings us here in the focus of our attention tonight, is entitled Enough: The Phony Leaders, Dead-End Movements, and Culture of Failure That Are Undermining Black America, and What We Can Do About It. Also not very controversial. Both are leading writers and thinkers on public policy matters, especially those matters relating to racial justice and democratic transformation. So please join me in welcoming Professor Guinier and by our sponsors and the Afro-American Cultural Center is Black Responsibility, and we want to get into that because on questions of personal responsibility, community responsibility, what the Black responsibility really means. But of course, this discussion or debate was reignited just a few years ago, in 2004. Many of you recall either hearing about, reading about, and some of you may have even been at Constitution Hall when our good leader and friend Bill Cosby, Dr. Bill Cosby, gave a speech. It was in the celebration of the 50th anniversary of Brown versus Board of Education. Dr. Cosby was given an award that night, and after receiving his award, he got up and gave a speech in which he said a memorable line about low income and poor blacks not keeping up their end of the deal. He talked about his concern that we had too many people who were focused on living large and hip-hop culture and not enough focused on education and getting ahead. He went on to try to encourage people, but in somewhat critical tones, talked about the fact that there needed to be an emphasis on responsibility, and that he thought that those heroes and sheroes that are involved in the 1954 Brown decision would be very upset at what they would see, particularly among low-income African Americans, that they were not taking advantage of society, taking advantage of the opportunities that had been opened up by Brown, and basically, once again, as he said, not living up or keeping up their end of the deal. So he was very concerned, particularly about communities and individuals, and he went back to low income and poor people not taking responsibility for their children, for their schools, and particularly for crime in their communities. Mr. Williams, after that speech, commented some, but listened, I believe, to a lot of people that responded to Bill Cosby in that speech. Some praised Cosby, some condemned him in very harsh words. And after a period of time, and reflecting on what Cosby said, after a period of reflection on those responding to him, Mr. Williams produced this book, again with the title, Enough: The Phony Leaders, Dead-End Movements, and Cultural Failure That Are Undermining Black America, and What We Can Do About It. So we want to talk tonight about some of the issues that were raised not only by Bill Cosby, but raised in the writings of Juan Williams and Lani Guinier, because they do overlap. There are these issues of responsibility and also issues about leadership, because as you know, he mentioned in his book, phony leaders and dead-end movements. So we'll ask him a little bit about that. But before we get to the issues in both the meritocracy and specifically in the book, I want to ask our guests tonight about their views on black leadership, on what it means to be a black leader. And because we happen to be here, and we've got two people with a unique view on life. Professor Guinier was a contemporary here at the Yale Law School of one Clarence Thomas. And Juan Williams has had access to Justice Thomas in a way that many reporters have not had. And I'm interested in where you think the black conservative in particular falls on this range now of black leadership. If you're explaining to people who the black leaders are in 2007, does Clarence Thomas qualify as a black leader? If so, why? If not, why not?
And thanks to all of you for joining us here tonight. When we think about whether or not Justice Thomas qualifies as a black leader, I think the very question suggests what a distorted world we live in. the man is the Supreme Court Justice of the United States. I don't think there's any measure by which you wouldn't say that such a person, one of 9, certainly the top of our judiciary system in this United States, there's no measure by which you would say that person is not an American leader. But the question suggests, oh, wait a second, is he a black leader? Oh, now we have a different set of criteria in place. And what is this criteria? What are these criteria? Exactly how would you measure if someone is black enough? Let me stop here for a moment and say that you hear this debate taking place now with regard to Barack Obama from some of the old-line civil rights issues. Oh, is he black enough? Is anybody black enough who disagrees with you if you're black? It seems to me to be a very cheap and easy way to try to put somebody down because you disagree with their policies or with their ideas. But it also suggests an historical dimension. The dimension is this, that for much of our history in America, what we have seen is that all of black leadership has been united on one point, fighting against slavery, against legal discrimination, against acts of bigotry and stereotypes of black people. This is truly the arc of justice that Dr. King spoke about, the long arc of justice that one day we hope will yield fruit for us all as Americans. And the idea that someone would say, well, is Justice Thomas a black leader, would suggest, well, he's not in keeping with that grand tradition. And my suggestion to you tonight would be, again, that this is such a distortion, because we are at a point in American history where we have black leaders in so many fields. No longer is a person defined by whether or not they are a civil rights leader in order to be a black leader. I'm always amused by the idea that when people ask me about where is the black leadership today, where are the great black leaders, where is the Dr. King of today? And I say that, well, have you ever looked at an opinion poll about American leadership at the start of the 21st century? The top ranking American leader is a black man. His name is Colin Powell. You say, oh, well, I don't mean that kind of leader. Oh, okay, so you don't mean Colin Powell. What's wrong with Colin Powell? Well, you know, he's a conservative, he's a Republican, his parents are from the West Indies, and it goes on and on. Again, all these attempts to marginalize or dismiss someone's ideas. But you can go into any frame of reference, any arena, whether it's science, entertainment, American business. You can start talking about the Dick Carsons of Time Warner, the Ken Chenaults in American Express, the Kurt Schultz's mayors of major American cities. And they say, well, no, I'm not talking about that kind of leader. So what kind of leader are you talking about? And again, it comes down to a very limited definition of someone who would speak in the tradition of old-time civil rights leaders. I think this is an anachronistic definition. I think it suggests that people who are trying to move forward in all areas of American life are less than faithful to the black tradition. I think this is destructive. I think it is the kind of thing that hurts us as a race. And I think that it is something that really requires us to stop and appreciate the idea that there are new people with new ideas, new viewpoints coming forward, and hopefully people who are attacking the status quo and helping us and helping those people who are being left behind by offering a model of possibility of what can be done in a much more diverse American society today.
Typo is Clarence Thomas a black leader? And the first question is, what is black and what is a leader? And then the second question is, when we talk about Clarence Thomas, are we talking about Clarence Thomas based on what he writes as a Supreme Court justice? Are we talking about Clarence Thomas based on the symbolic role he plays in the American media? Which Clarence Thomas are we talking about? So I want to offer 3 ways of thinking about leadership that might help us to answer this question, not just about Clarence Thomas, but in some ways about leadership itself. So the first point is, I don't think that a leader is a leader simply because the media has decided to give that person a lot of attention. And to me, one of the biggest problems I have with our discussion about leadership in this country is that it's really about fame. It's really about, do people know your name? And that somehow makes you a leader, and what you say is important, or we should pay attention to you. I think of leadership not as a status, certainly not as a fixed status, but as a relationship. And it is a relationship to ideas, it is a relationship to vision, it is also a relationship to communities or constituencies that are both capable of holding you accountable to a shared vision, but also potentially following your lead or being guided by it, or at least interacting with you in this shared journey. Now, thinking about leadership as a relationship rather than a status comes to the second part of this question. A relationship with whom? And is this person purporting to be in relationship with the Black community, or is this person purporting not to be in relationship with anyone, but to be their own thinker, their own person? In some sense, Juan called it anachronistic, but I would suggest that part of what you see in most Supreme Court justices' biographies is a sense of individualism, and a sense that they are not they're not leading anybody. They are, Clarence Thomas is a Black leader. I don't think he purports to be a Black leader, and I don't think that if you were to try to understand, well, who is he leading, that you would be able to identify a coherent constituency of accountability that would say, this is our leader and we are following him. Now, you could say, well, maybe a leader is really a person who is more like Nelson Mandela, who defined leadership as that of a shepherd. And he said, a shepherd, in leading a flock, doesn't stand in front of the flock and say, hey, come follow me. The shepherd identifies one or two energetic sheep who are moving in the right direction, and then corrals the rest of the sheep to follow the energetic leaders. And there you see a more complicated understanding of leadership, in which the shepherd is leading by identifying the young, energetic sheep who are, quote, moving in the right direction, but the young, energetic sheep are also leading by taking a risk, by identifying a path. That's what I mean by a relationship and a dynamic. And given that understanding, I think the question is really irrelevant.